Hello, welcome. Today is September 30th, 2023, and this is the live Manhattan Project show on Saturday. And I wanted to take a moment to appreciate how breathtaking this moment in history is right now, because at this point, we're seeing lots of things breaking, lots of things moving and shaping around the world, really spinning off of the BRICS process. What you're seeing happening in Germany and Poland with a certain break and change in mood. There's this peace proposal that has just come out from leading German officials, representatives in Germany, professors, peace activists, military people. Mrs. LaRouche has really emphasized this as an important organizing activation, that we should really take this right now and mobilize around the world with it. And at the same time, in the same breath, we're seeing lots of changes happening in the United States with what's rumored now as an announcement of RFK Jr. Soon to be running as an independent, which would be a very interesting landscape here in the United States. So what I'd like to do is start off by going to Mrs. LaRouche from her webcast this past Wednesday and have her open up the discussion for today. So please, could you show that?
Helga, there's been a growing recognition internationally that the NATO-backed counteroffensive by Ukraine has not gone as planned. And as the casualties increase, there have been calls for a peaceful resolution through diplomacy, more calls for that, as urged by 4 prominent Germans, for example, in a peace plan published on August 28th. But there are also calls in the other direction for an escalation. The London Economist magazine called for a rethink, saying that the West has to plan for, quote, a long struggle, unquote. And just yesterday, the British Royal think tank Chatham House had a discussion, a podcast, chiding the West for inadequate support and called for, quote, a redoubling of efforts, unquote. Now, some, such as Gilbert Doctor, are describing this as NATO's Plan B. That is an escalation, including the targeting of the Russian Black Sea Fleet in Crimea, which was hit twice over the weekend by missiles from the West. What are your thoughts about the direction this is heading? Are Washington and NATO committed to moving toward a Plan B?
Well, that is very difficult to be 100% certain about, but unfortunately all the signs are in the direction that may be the case, because, I can only highlight the proposal you mentioned from these 4 Germans. These were Horst Telschik, former head of the Munich Security Conference and top diplomat in the time of the German unification, General Kujat, formerly highest military in Germany and leading position in NATO, in the NATO Military Committee, the son of Willy Brandt, Peter Brandt, and Professor Funke. And that proposal made that choice very, very clear. This was published already end of August. And it says that, very soon NATO will be faced with a decision of either recognizing the fact that the military operation in Ukraine failed and the counteroffensive of Ukraine also, and that leaves only two options. One is immediately negotiations for a diplomatic solution, and secondly, an escalation which quickly may bring the world to the level of a nuclear catastrophe. And then it is a very detailed, very appropriate proposal how such peace negotiations could actually take place. Now, I think that is indeed the choice, and the article you mentioned by Gilbert Doktorov, who is convinced that such a Plan B is already in function, namely that, the general gossip or, line that, okay, Ukraine is lost, So let's move on to the next confrontation with China over Taiwan, which apparently is the discussion in Washington and elsewhere. That, however, is not what is happening, but that indeed we are seeing an escalation, where the NATO is basically positioning itself to increasingly make the Black Sea an area of confrontation with Russia directly. And naturally, the decision which is reported by about the Biden administration that they will leave the so-called ATACMS missile, which have a range of 300 kilometers, and then following that would, the decision be made by the German government to send the Taurus cruise missiles, which have a range of 500 kilometers, therefore being both capable of very far-reaching into Russian territory, Crimea, or whatever other areas behind the front lines. So that is where we seem to be at. There were these attacks on Sevastopol, and up to now, it seems that Scholz is still hesitating to make the absolute commitment, but as things have gone for the last 1.5 years, the chance that he holds up and does not give the permission for the deployment of these Taurus cruise missiles, I'm not very confident at all. And, it is a fact that, these cruise missiles would be deployed not one at the time, but it would probably be a whole group of them, which would basically mean that the supply line of continuous delivery of these Taurus missiles, which are being produced actually in Bavaria, would be necessary. And that would clearly make Germany a war party in the conflict. And, if then things escalate to that point, we could very quickly have direct military confrontation between NATO and Russia, involving Germany as a country of departure of these missiles. So I think, people better wake up. This is going, in my view, completely wrong. I think the degree of mobilization of the population, of the awareness, how dangerously close we are to a catastrophe is not there. That's naturally due to massive campaigns of propaganda and disinformation in the mainstream media. But I think we are on that path, and I think it is absolutely urgent that people really make their desire to be heard, that we absolutely need to have an immediate ceasefire, as the Kuyat-Telschik-Funke-Brandt proposal is suggesting, and that everybody must really rally around that proposal, which in my view is the most accurate and the most feasible proposal on the table.
So, I'm sorry, was that the end of it there? Okay. So what I want to just situate the world, given what Helga has just laid out with this situation that's happening in Europe, and then also what we're organizing, how we're organizing as an organization and moving forward. What are the qualities and principles that we actually need in order to create real peace in the world? Helga LaRouche has put out what she calls the 10 principles, and this is 10 principles for dialogue, which I'll include in the chat here so people can look this over. I recommend seriously studying this. The International Peace Coalition, we're taking these ideas and we're going out and organizing with it. We're going to be taking this peace proposal and organizing with it. We're not just sitting back and taking in everything that's happening in the world, but we're actively responding and mobilizing the population in order to save this world from a nuclear annihilation of mankind. So we just had a very exciting delegation, Schiller Institute delegation to China. And I think that this is an excellent example of how you have a dialogue of cultures, how you have you bring youth together to discuss what are the best ideas that have come out of our countries. How do you communicate that to one another? How do you come to an understanding? And this is the same concept of peace through economic development. That when you share these highest principles, these higher ideas amongst all people, then you can see the commonality of everything that makes us human. What are the common aims of mankind? So with that, I'd like Kynan Thistlethwaite, who's one of our youth leaders. There we go. Yeah, one of our youth movement leaders, to start us off on just some of the experiences that you've had with this delegation going into China, what that has taught you, maybe some of your organizing experiences, and we'll get a discussion going here. Why don't you go ahead?
Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Anastasia. I just want to begin by thanking the organizers of our delegation, especially Daniel Burke, Lainey Rubenstein, our China expert, the Schiller Institute, and Megan DeBroad, who's the president of the Schiller Institute. And I'll just start by talking about some things that I learned during the trip, not simply about China, but on how to actually organize and engage with people from another culture. I have to say that we saw many incredible things in China, ranging from different cultural sites like the Forbidden Palace and the Great Wall, to huge industrial projects that have defined China's growth in the past few decades, such as the European Industrial City in the Qinbaijiang district of Chengdu, which is in Sichuan province, and also many railway ports, major railway ports, innovation centers, tech industries, and entrepreneurship centers. We were treated incredibly well by our Chinese hosts, who all expressed a desire for mutually beneficial China-US relations, which was actually been defined by President Xi Jinping's 3 global initiatives for a new just world order. And that's the Global Development Initiative, the Global Strategic Initiative, and the Global Civilization Initiative. I'll just share a report that we actually received on our trip, which, if Jose, you can share that for people. Yeah, there it is. And it's called A Global Community of Shared Future, China's Proposals and Actions, presented by the State Council Information Office of the People's Republic of China. Many of the people we had discussions with, whether they were from universities, political institutions, economic centers, or even rural villages, all of them communicated as a desire for a world community based on shared interests, win-win cooperation, and just economic development. One of the things that I actually overcame in my discussions with people, and I can also say this, I think, for the majority of our delegation, was the tendency to remark on how bad everything is in the United States. I'd often have conversations like, your roads here in Beijing, they're just so smooth and well maintained. In New York, it's hard not to encounter potholes every day that you drive, or something like, your streets and sidewalks, they're so clean. Public transportation is really affordable here, and there's no homeless people on the streets. As a New Yorker, I'd say it's a trademark of ours to constantly complain and self-deprecate ourselves. But if you're traveling to another country to function as a statesman, a diplomat, you have to not only recognize the best in another, but in yourself as well. I think we gained a lot by switching our focus on not simply how bad everything is in the United States and the West, but also in the best traditions our country had to offer. I found myself, for example, talking to our Chinese host about the poetry of Edgar Allan Poe. One of the things we had stressed, both in discussion and presentations our delegation gave to some of the universities in Beijing and Chengdu, which were the cities we visited, was the compatibility of the ideas of the great Chinese philosopher Confucius with the ideas of Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz Plato, and the German poet Friedrich Schiller. Confucius had the idea that every human being was capable of being a sage, or Sheng Ren in Chinese, meaning someone who develops their creative potential to the fullest, mastering the ideas of philosophy, poetry, science, art, and music, while also developing their love for mankind. To us, that's known as agape in Greek, and in China, it's known by the character Ren. Friedrich Schiller also had the idea that man could become a beautiful soul through aesthetical education, which meant studying the highest ideals of classical culture and artistic beauty. We also talked about Gottfried Leibniz's study of China and his view of the compatibility of the ideas of Confucianism and Christianity. In a journal he published called Novissima Sinica in 1697, that's News from China, Leibniz had remarked that he considered it, quote, a singular plan of the fates that human cultivation and refinement should today be concentrated, as it were, in the two extremes of our continent, in Europe and in China, which adorns the Orient as Europe does the opposite edge of the earth. I'm just giving these as examples of what defined our discussion in China, as it was constantly growing into a more profound and meaningful dialogue based on the best of our two cultures and what they have to offer to the development of the world. I believe this dialogue of culture and ideas not only impressed our hosts, but provided them with a feeling of happiness and relief in knowing the better angels of our nature. So to summarize, I believe the most important thing from the trip was the interactions our delegation had with the various people that we met from all different sectors of society. I saw firsthand the importance of Helga and Lyndon LaRouche's ideas at the Chongyang Institute for Financial Studies at Renmin University of China. And there, you could see featured a copy of the Schiller Institute report released in 2014 called The New Silk Road Becomes the World Land Bridge, which is the conceptual, physical roadmap for designing a new world economic order, which is currently being charted by the nations of the BRICS. So I think our job is to rekindle those great traditions that once defined the United States and use this trip as our guide to organizing people in the West. So that's my short report.
Thank you, Kynan. That's excellent. No, I think that's a very, very good way to express what you experienced there. And I'd actually like to ask Daniel Burke to come forward. I know he's got kind of a general overview and some reflections himself on the trip as well. You there, Daniel?
Yes, can you hear and see me?
Yes.
Great, thank you, Anastasia. I really agree with everything that you put forward, Kynan, and I just want to touch on some of the basics of what we did there to share with people what kind of incredible hospitality we received while we were there, which really opened up the potential for in-depth people-to-people exchanges, which really means making friends and having relaxed and open discussions about the most important ideas that we can share between our nations and that we can share as part of the new era, as part of the opening up of a completely new paradigm for humanity. So I have a slideshow. Is that working? There we go. Thank you very much. So I just want to show maybe 7 or 8 pictures. This is a picture from the welcoming event that we were really honored to participate in, that was organized by the All China Youth Federation. You can see some of the classical Chinese musicians on the right who performed for us some very well-known classical Chinese pieces and on erhu and on other classical Chinese instruments. But really, we just had a large number of people who were there to make this people-to-people relationship a priority. So I wanted to share this and then to go continue. There we go. Okay, that's working. This is an example of a panel discussion that we had, an exchange between the Schiller Institute and the All China Youth Federation, in which we were able to contribute really clearly what Kynan was discussing. This is the kind of venue where we were having these conversations about the very best of the culture upon which the U.S. Republic was truly founded. And so you can see this was a very respectful and productive environment to be able to contribute the specific ideas that the Schiller Institute has and to communicate what is it that we're doing, what is the responsibility, the special responsibility that we have taken on to revive the best traditions, the best concepts within the U.S. tradition. So I'll have more to say about that a little bit later, but I want to show some more pictures. At that event, we were introduced to an important white paper called The Youth of China in the New Era, which was released by the State Council Information Office of China in 2022. And this is very important way that the Chinese government is communicating their ideas and they're organizing their approach. And what we really encountered in China was a top-down orientation towards carrying out the uplifting of society according to the requirements of a new paradigm, of a new era that is not defined by blocks and that is not defined by hegemonism, but is oriented towards mutual benefit, win-win cooperation, and the shared community of destiny for mankind. So this was just very exciting and inspiring to see the way that people are representing these ideas and trying to follow through on them. At the same time that we also saw a diversity of views. We had meetings at, this is a picture from our visit, as Kynan mentioned, to the Chongyang Institute of Finance at Renmin University. And here you can see in the middle, Megan de Broot and Professor Liu Yangsheng, who is the president of Hao Capital, HAO Hao Capital, which is a major financial institution that's been involved in investment in BRI projects. And he gave us an extensive briefing on his view of what he called Belt and Road Initiative 2.0, which is from his standpoint, the shifting orientation of Belt and Road Initiative projects towards manufacturing and development on the scale of industrialization as the next step past major infrastructure projects. And to his left in this photo, you can see Professor Zhao, who has been working on the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor as an area of specialization for perhaps a whole decade since that project began. And he had a lot to say about the future potential of the Belt and Road Initiative. And also he told us that the Schiller Institute is known for its commitment to the developing world. And on that basis, we want to welcome you into this dialogue. So you can see we had a wonderful opportunity to have this kind of open discussion with representatives of a leading think tank in China. This is a picture from one of the more remarkable days that we had, which was a visit to a village about an hour and a half from Beijing, which is an example of the rural revitalization in China. And you can see this young man in the white shirt on the left. His name is Wang. I think his given name is escaping me at the moment, but Mr. Wang. And he is a young man who is leading the rural revitalization project in this town. We met students at top universities who are studying economic development from the highest standpoint. who volunteer their time to come out and work to uplift the village and other villages like this. So that was really very hopeful, exciting moment to see this kind of quality of of giving, of contribution to society, and in harmony with everything that is going on from the top down in the economic miracle in China. You saw the sort of the relationship between people, which I'm sure other people will comment more on, but the relationship between people who came into the village to support it and people who have been living there, there was a great happiness there that we saw it was a lasting happiness as a result of this kind of contribution and this work together to revitalize the rural areas of China. So there's much more to say on this, but I just wanted to show a quick picture. And here we are meeting with the representatives of the CPPCC, which is the consultative body of the that advises the National People's Congress, the deputies of the National People's Congress. Here we are in Dongcheng district in Beijing. It's a district with about 1 million people. And we received a thorough presentation on the role of the CPPCC, of this body that has a crucial role in whole process democracy in China, and how it is that good ideas are brought forward for government policy by people in this organization. So there's much more to say on that. And then after our visit in Beijing, we went to Chengdu, which is the capital city of Sichuan province, we learned so much in Sichuan about Sichuan, about the development of China along the Belt and Road Initiative. This is a hub for the Belt and Road Initiative and for the trains that go back and forth between Europe and China, which take about 15 days. And often goods would come from Europe and go into the ASEAN countries from Chengdu. And then, of course, there are lots of things that are being produced in Chengdu that are going to Europe. So here we are at Chengdu University, where we had an opportunity to discuss the white paper that Kynan mentioned, A Global Community of Shared Future, China's Proposals and Actions, with leading figures at the university, including the president and the vice president of Chengdu University, and here Tong Jintian, the secretary of Sichuan Provincial Committee of the Communist Youth League and the honorary president of the Sichuan Youth Federation. Well, it was here that we really, I thought, came together with in addition to presentations that took place at Tsinghua University in Beijing, here we had a really beautiful opportunity to communicate the potential in the United States to participate in a shared community of destiny for mankind. We were able to demonstrate that there are precedents in our culture and in our political life, in our political history, for exactly the kind of proposals that you're hearing from the Chinese government for a new, just security and development architecture. With, of course, the feature part of this being the role for us of Lyndon LaRouche and Helga LaRouche, of our LaRouche movement over 50 years in promulgating the principles and the blueprints required for bringing about that new paradigm. And so we were able to highlight the economic, scientific ideas of LaRouche, including potential relative population density, energy flux density, and his triple curve heuristic, in order to communicate what are some crucial new ideas that can be contributed as a way of lifting humanity out of the danger of a Hobbesian war of each one against each one, of all against all, to lift us out of that evil structure of the Anglo-Dutch liberal system and into the new paradigm that we're all seeking. So I found this to be an extremely rich opportunity, and we got we had a very productive dialogue on these questions. So in general, that's what I'd like to share. There's much more that my friends will be able to contribute, but I can say that we learned. I mean, the thing I'd like to sort of emphasize is that what we encountered is a society in which the common welfare, the general welfare, is being pursued top down. And there's a certain cultural basis for that is definitely has one of its core characteristics being Confucianism. When we spoke to people about how important this idea of the community of shared destiny for mankind, how important this idea is for humanity, the response came back, yes, this is Xi Jinping. Yes, this is the government of China today, but this is an idea that goes back over 2,000 years to Confucius. And there's a certain faith and confidence in the ability to carry through proposals that are based on these deep principles of Chinese civilization, which I think it's for us to seek unto the same basis for action in our civilization, in our language culture. And that, of course, has been the mission of Lyndon and Helga LaRouche for all this time. So it gives me an even greater ability to recommit to that outlook and to the work that needs to be done here. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Oh, wow. You guys were all over the place. Oh, that's great. Oh, man. Well, next I'd like to ask Michelle Erin to come up. Michelle, there you are.
Hello.
Yeah. Hi.
So, thanks for having this program. I'd like to share some of the cultural exchange that we had while we were there. One little Daniel reminded me, the revitalized village we visited, they do Airbnbs now. You know, if somebody told me, oh, college students are going out to these small villages to revitalize them, it might have been different a few decades ago, but these are modern people, modern young people. So they turned a bunch of the homes in this, a bunch of the buildings in this area into modern Airbnbs. And what I wanted to mention about this, that, you know, they're doing some tourism from Beijing. It's very nice. There's a beautiful river. Call me later. I'll tell you what town it is. You can go visit. But part of how they're advertising these Airbnbs is by not only sharing photos of the buildings, but each building gets a poem written by a modern poet. I'm just going to read you one of these poems. Forgive the jerkiness from translation and language barrier, but so this is posted on the outside of this building so that people can be inspired to come. So it says, twist a wisp of seclusion and sit quietly, wandering in the starry night sky. The years are quiet under the eaves at night. The warmth of the lights is hidden away, and the peace of the people between the windows and fans is enjoyed peace. So I just thought that was an interesting part of, you know, one thing that I think understand a little bit more is how the language is somewhat poetic. People have seen the Chinese characters that are somewhat pictorial. So what I want to do is actually share with you some photos, share sound. Okay, so this first little video, one of the things that we were going to do on this trip is actually sing for our hosts, to sing for people, perhaps some of the most beautiful music from from our cultural background. And this little video is from our first rehearsal, which was at night in the courtyard of the hotel we were staying at. So let's cross our fingers, and you'll see we have a guest who has joined us. Saw the little girl. Oh, stop playing. Whoops. Okay, there we go. So the little girl who joined, we were singing some Bach, and we were joined by a young Chinese girl who liked it, who wanted to dance and participate with us. So the first night that we were received, part of the program included. Here, I can jump into these guys. Back to screen share. Okay. And we got to hear some traditional Chinese instruments being played. And what was delightful, these were all younger people, is they seemed so happy to be playing these Chinese instruments. It was wonderful.
Hey, Michelle?
Yes.
Just pause for a second. We're not able actually to see the picture or the video that you're showing.
Oh.
It might have to do with the screen share option. Could you just try to restart the screen share and select the...
Did the other one play?
Well, we could hear it, but we couldn't see it.
Oh, that really would kill the whole point of it. Okay. Thank you for that interruption. So stop share. Start share. Okay. Now look. Okay. So, all right. We'll hope for the best on the future screen sharing. So does that mean that you cannot see this photo? Can you see this photo?
Not currently.
Okay. Then I might just have to go one by one. If I have a photo.
There we go.
So here's one photo. So we got to hear these traditional instruments. Also that evening, I sang a very famous Chinese folk song, Mo Li Hua, which means, which is about a jasmine flower, but it's actually not about the jasmine flower. It's a very interesting character of the Chinese culture, the principle of generosity. The translation of this Mo Li Hua poem is describing the beautiful, beautiful flower. It smells so wonderful. It's this beautiful color. And may I pluck one of you so that I can give you to someone else. And that is like the most famous Chinese folk song. Our friends were very happy that one of the American colleagues presented this, and they even brought it up in one of our formal discussions a couple days later. Also, our chorus sang Dona Nobis Pacem at that event, and I translated, it means give us peace, and our friends were very happy that we were singing about give us peace. So let's see. I'll narrow it down a little bit, especially given my technical difficulties. We went to a youth center in Beijing where a lot of their programs for helping young people include having art programs. Hopefully you can see these are a couple of our guys dressed up in Chinese opera costumes.
Beautiful.
We also, while we were there, we did some clickety-click here. We did some painting, painted some bunnies and heard a teacher at their school playing the traditional erhu instrument. The erhu, R is number 2 in Chinese. So the erhu is an instrument with exactly 2 strings. So we got to hear her playing a little bit. Let's see. Oh, I tried to sneak in that video and it's not coming. So I'll stop trying to sneak. It didn't work. All right, so what else we got here? One historic thing that was very interesting was down in the Chengdu region, there's a archaeological site that was only begun to be excavated in the 1930s. And this site includes tons and tons of copper, jade, gold, other just beautiful, beautiful things that actually date back to 3,000 to 4,000 years ago. This is one of those things that dates back, I think, to dates back to about 1600 BC, which is quite impressive. And just as a side note, they had a whole presentation on the modern methods of archaeological digs. Because where we used to just dig a big pit, we've discovered that when you expose these old objects to oxygen, to light, to sunlight, it can totally destroy them. So now they had this glass room that they put on top of each new section that's going to be excavated. So they're going to protect the atmosphere. And they have this high-tech equipment on the ceiling that has tracks it moves on, that's able to do different parts of this very advanced process now of digging. And you see this guy, the room it wasn't quite that dark. I tinked with my photo so it would come out a little nicer. But all these artifacts, they're in the museum is dimly lit to preserve it. Okay. More to some of the exciting ones here. We'll work backwards. We went to, okay, I'm gonna do just one picture of this beautiful town. So we went to a village that's known as the New Year Village, the Manchu New Year Village, where the village is known for art. Because part of China it's almost a cross, I think, between development and the question of preserving the beautiful from the past. So this village continues to exist. There are people who still live in it, and while we were there, again, we were asked to do some of their style of artwork. They do prints with ink, and you have to rub the paper on top of it, and it creates a very pretty design. Okay, one or two more. I'm looking for something we did in Beijing, which was very exciting. We went to the Central Academy of Fine Arts. Maybe I don't have a picture, so I'll show you something from right here, which is we went to the Central Academy of Fine Arts and saw a wonderful exhibit of traditional Chinese, those scroll arts that many of us are familiar with. So there, many of them are 4 feet tall or bigger or smaller. And this set, they all seem to date from around the 1600s. And we had some discussion on some of the way Chinese think, which is reflected in the artwork. A lot of these pieces have mountains, and you might have a small person near these mountains. So one of our team said, well, isn't this showing that human beings are small compared to nature because of the size difference? And our guide said, that's not the way we think about this. The Chinese think that there's a harmony between human beings and nature. There's no separation in that sense. So they see that there's a harmony there. So after we saw some of these beautiful works, mountains, people, we went fortunately quickly through a more modern wing where the art wasn't as attractive in my view, and we're brought to another part of the museum to be given a presentation on Chinese calligraphy. And so this was mine. Can you see it? I practiced before. I did practice, I promise.
Well, oh, there we go.
Oh, come on.
It's the background.
Oh, okay.
There we go. We can see it.
All right. This is the Chinese character for happiness, not the doodles on the right. I had accidentally drawn my character to the side, and one of my kind teacher, who was a student, told me I could put little doodles on the side to fill in the space I'd left. But the Chinese character for happiness, there's actually several different handwriting, like what do we call it? Fonts. There's several different fonts. It can look several different ways. And to my eyes, right now I recognize this font. I probably wouldn't recognize the others, but that was a fun thing. And let me just round off by going to what we did the final evening, which I know the program today is going to conclude also with a video of our presentation. So the final evening, we one more important one is we had a tea ceremony given to us by one of our hosts, and I will share a picture of this. So the tea ceremony, it was one of our hosts pouring tea for us. Okay, I have the picture. Now let me share this. And so that's not the best picture. I should have done one that pointed at the host. Let's do it that way. Okay. So one of our friends gave us this lovely tea ceremony, which did involve drinking tea and pouring of tea, and that was nice. But it was more of a medium for discussion. Our friend, he told us that he does tea. He's a younger guy. You can see he's not a super old man, but he does tea ceremonies at his house with his friends so they can discuss what books they've read recently. And this is a mode of social interaction that he chooses around the tea ceremony. And while we were there drinking our tea, he spoke on his understanding of some of the philosophical ideas of Chinese culture. How do Chinese see the individual in society versus the family unit versus the nation as a whole? And it's interesting, he was able to refer to the Declaration of Independence and certain other American concepts that he's definitely looked at. One interesting concept, someone asked, well, do the Chinese put sugar in their tea? Do they ever put sugar in their tea? And he said that never, never, that the Chinese see that the nation that appreciates bitterness is the most mature. Like children wanting sweets versus the more mature. And he said that they see it this way because they see that bitterness is part of the process of learning and part of the process of coming to know yourself. He compared it to a baby discovering its hand is its own from some prick of the hand. And said that some Chinese actually pay to give their children the opportunity to go out to an impoverished area and experience difficulties so that they can learn. Okay, so let me skip to the final night. Our hosts at Chengdu University had a musical program. It involved some of the students at the university presenting traditional music, which was wonderful. They had a famous calligraphist give a class right on stage with 5 of our delegation who went up and were presented with models and did calligraphy in front of the audience. And then at a certain point in the program, we made our offering. I sang, let me stop this. Okay. I sang an African American spiritual. Why? Because this is uniquely American. They're beautiful. They're, aside from being uniquely American in historic origin, but they're also universal, as great art tends to be. And I think the little girl we saw at the beginning reflects that. She didn't have a problem liking German, Bach music. So I sang this one. Megan DeBroat, the president of the U.S. Schiller Institute, played a Bach partita on a flute. And then our chorus sang 3 songs. The spiritual Deep River, the first chorale of Bach's Jesu meine Freude, and then a very rousing rendition of an American patriotic song composed by one of the early Massachusetts Bay Colony settlers, who was a very accomplished musician and composer. Rally Round the Flag. I might have gotten my composers mixed, but we did Rally Round the Flag, which is also known as the Battle Cry of Freedom. And that music was very well received by our friends. And yeah, let's leave it there.
Thank you, Michelle. That was really a wonderful travel through all of these cultural experiences in China. Thank you so much. No, we're definitely getting a lot of people who are like, oh my gosh, could you describe more about this, and that, which will come to some of these questions at the end of it. There's a lot of people who are curious about what you think about certain things. So we'll definitely get to those. But I'd like to invite Mike Cambell to come on now. You there, Mike?
I am. Howdy. Just
howdy.
Yeah, it's good to be here. Thank you. Yeah, and I'm more grateful than ever for 2 reasons. To be half Chinese by heritage, which is a tradition my family has had less and less contact with since moving to the US 7 years ago. And secondly, to be able to share the ideas of the Schiller Institute, to the best of my ability and try to be the best of Western culture in the face of such turmoil. I was so proud to be a member of the LaRouche movement, to try to be a diplomat for the American system of economics. And anyone who's on these calls knows of the Roosevelt Recovery, the Tennessee Valley Authority, and in China, I had the opportunity to witness what top-down economic planning looks like in action. Jose, could you pull the first slide? Is that up? Yeah, there we go. I just can't see it. Yeah, this is a heat map from Baidu, their Google. It's just search volume by location, by city. Slide. And we went to the Beijing Municipal Transportation Center, which, Beijing is the highest volume of traffic in the world, and it coordinates all of it. Automobile traffic, the subway, even the bikes, all of it 24 hours a day. And currently 70% of their people are currently using public transportation. It was a pretty amazing setup to see, sitting in New York traffic. But we also went to an industrial park, which is entirely dedicated to innovation and startups. Coordinates them, fosters them, that gives them office space and planning. The plan was complete with an activity center filled with 20 to 35-year-olds congregating on a Sunday afternoon. Slide, please. This was in Chengdu, which has a key position on the Belt and Road Initiative, and it's designated as a youth city by the Chinese government in that one of the white papers that Daniel presented. The population of Chengdu has tripled in the past 30 years. So with this top-down planning, I got to turn around and share back that the American system of national credit applied to a national mission to maximize the general welfare, that this was a parallel in both of our cultures, a common humanity and the means for cooperation and dialogue. Supposedly China's our enemy, that they're eating our lunch. What I found in the face of all the accusations I hear from fearful Americans on the street, whipped up by the media, especially from our State Department, is that the Chinese leaders that we heard from, they were patient and humble. They kind of know that our policies are tragic and fatal, going to be fatal to ourselves, and almost to a fault. They were not worried about the harm and coercion that the West is trying to inflict. The people, the young students we met, who have done cultural exchanges in the past with Ivy League universities, they were so modest and almost to a fault again. The humility in the face of the strategic situation, in combination with their economic success, absolutely blew me away. Slide, please. One thing to wrap up with is that this village, which is famous for plowman poets like Robbie Burns, and slide, their motto is carrying hose on busy days and holding pens on idle days. Slide. And slide again. And as part of their national rejuvenation, this village has been fostered and promoted as a cultural center. It's kind of funny. On the board, it said one village, one product, right? To unify and maximize it as a resource, as just something beautiful in their culture, in their civilization. But slide. So just to wrap up, I think China's, what I witness is that China is truly a 5,000-year-old culture with the wisdom to back it up. And anything you hear that doesn't take that into account can't be true. I think we have a great partner waiting for us across the ocean, and they're just looking for ways to reach out and cooperate on the common aims of mankind. With that, thank you. That's what I got.
Thank you, Mike. I really like that last picture where it showed the modern background, the backdrop of the new city with the classical Chinese buildings. That was really beautiful.
Yeah, it's the tallest building in Beijing.
Is it one of the tallest in the world?
That I couldn't say, okay. But it's also the view from the Forbidden City.
Well, it's beautiful. Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, next I'd like to ask Robert Castle to come up. You there, Robert?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can I be okay? You can hear me. It seems like there might be a slight delay, but yeah. All right. So a lot of my sort of notes have been covered. So I'm just trying to sort of figure out how to add to what has been said instead of just repeat it. And so I think, are my slides being shown? Can I have my slides pulled up, please?
They're
They
up
are
now.
being shown.
Okay, great. So the first two slides that I have, the first one is a picture that I took from the ground there at Dujiangyang, which is massive, as has been said, a massive large-scale irrigation project. And in a presentation that we received from Mr. Wang, he basically explained that this project can be understood as a sort of key for understanding Chinese culture and the Chinese civilization. And he went into a lot of how the Sichuan province sort of is a cradle of Chinese civilization, and it all sort of in the way that he explained it, it all sort of emanated out of this one key infrastructure project. And so obviously this isn't the place to go through the whole history of that, but the fact that he described it as a key to understanding the entire sort of history of the civilization all the way through, you know, like World War II, when this irrigation project was providing I think something like a third of all of the food stuff. It's pretty fascinating to understand how this irrigation project could have could be such a key to understanding China. And I think that one of the things that's particularly interesting about this is the fact that it's basically, I don't know what the exact term is, like geoscaping or something, where it's mainly what has been done is they've just redirected the flow of the river more so than actually damming it. And I think that is reflective, as we were told in the presentation, of a very specific kind of philosophy of working in harmony with nature. And I'll just say at that point that something that I was really, really struck by in almost every moment, really, in both in Beijing and in Chengdu and in all of the personal interactions that I had, was a sense of a sort of pervasive sense of harmony. That's not to say that it was, you know, perfect place or something like that, but just that the way that the traffic flowed and the way that people moved in social spaces, and, you know, elderly people gathering together in public to dance, there was definitely a sense of harmony that deeply affected me. If I could go to the third slide with Sanxing Doi. Michelle already touched on this, and I really only wanted to present this slide just as a sort of visual reference for anyone who might be watching to see, I guess, how the thing that struck me was how different these cultural artifacts were from anything that I had ever seen in a museum, with ancient artifacts from, you know, ancient Greece, for example. And without getting into any sort of concrete historical details, what I really just wanted to focus on was what I experienced, which was a real shock in understanding the depth of the history and the depth of the difference on the one hand, but as you can see, like on the left there, this circle divided into 5 parts representing some form of understanding of the golden ratio several thousand years ago. So then there you can understand also the deep similarity or unity of ancient Chinese culture in the Sichuan province with ancient cultures from the West. So if I can just move to the last slide, this is sort of where I want to mostly focus, and this is mainly just to reiterate something that I think basically Kynan wanted to focus on at the beginning, which is the importance of peer-to-peer communication, which was definitely put at the forefront of everything that we heard from our hosts. It was reiterated Xi Jinping's opinion of, or his position about the importance of peer-to-peer exchange, particularly in regard to the extremely difficult global strategic situation, and on top of peer-to-peer exchange, specifically young people and youth. And so here you can see a picture of one of our delegates shaking hands with one of our hosts, and that particular relationship turned out to be a very beautiful thing to watch unfold throughout the trip. And there was a lot like that. And I had the opportunity to get to know the translator that we had working with us in Beijing. And I met him at the first opening reception, and I sat down at the table with him, and it was just me and him, and we were kind of, just like getting to know each other, feeling each other out. And after maybe 30 seconds or a minute, he kind of just took off his glasses and leaned in, and I felt this immediate personable quality in his approach. And in that moment, I realized pretty quickly something which then was borne out in the relationship that we developed in the next few days, which was that it wasn't just a political talking point, this idea of the need for peer-to-peer exchange, but that he clearly really believed, this translator, in the value of communicating on a personal level his understanding of what was happening in China. And in general, there was definitely, I was very impressed by the amount of historical knowledge that all of our hosts had, and not just the fact that they had such historical knowledge, but that they were very eager to communicate it to us and to one another, and that there was clearly a sense of pride, but it was not. But it was a pride that was also mixed with a real humility and a desire to not belittle us as Americans. And it was very inspiring in that sense, because my understanding of the situation that we have back home here in America is that we need to rediscover our history. And so to have that example as something to hold in mind is very inspiring. And not only can we learn from the Chinese about their history, they can learn from us about ours. And I think that's something to be extremely hopeful about going forward, especially with regard to political bodies and how we organize them, and our cultures. And so anyway, I think that's about all I have to say.
Thank you, Robert. I think that's a really good point, is that through this personal dialogue amongst people, actually being able to talk and not just having, I guess the term is like an avatar, people talking to each other's avatars, which is just, it's fake. There's this fake idea of, what one country is, or a stereotype, or vice versa as well. But having this personal connection with people and understanding where they're coming from actually is a really important point. So thank you so much, Robert, for presenting that.
Absolutely.
Next I'd like to have Jose Vega, please.
Hi, can you hear me okay, and can you see me okay?
Yes, we can.
All right, thank you, Anastasia. First, I want to thank our hosts who actually made it possible for us to understand the real China, who took us around. And I also want to thank the rest of my delegation for describing what we actually experienced. I could not have asked for a better group of people to tour China with, and I'm really happy that I went with the group that we had. And I don't think I can ever express my appreciation for what I actually experienced in that country enough to the group of organizers that actually got us over to China. I know that I've grown up in New York City my whole life, and to go outside of the country for the first time and basically to go to the equivalent of Mars for me was like a very reality bending, and it has broadened my horizons, and I'm a better person because of it. And to kind of start off with what I want to present, I'm gonna like this here. This is a picture of me doing, I think this was us doing outlining or something of art, which I never really did as a kid or ever really. So this was one of the first times that I actually started doing this. And the importance of why we were doing this was because we were learning patience, which I find is a very big virtue over in that country. And I think for them to just kind of force us to slow down and sit down, which Michelle touched upon a bit with the tea ceremony. When we also went through the tea ceremony, we were told, you know, patience is the key. People will sit and drink tea for about 40 minutes or so. And the whole point is to just take a minute and sit down and really find yourself within that. And I think this was also an example of doing just that. This is a picture of our side of the delegation when we were having a mutual exchange back and forth between our people and also their group of delegation that had this kind of fruitful dialogue with us. So you can see the kind of back and forth that we were having. This was like a Q&A session. They were presenting something, and we were then able to ask questions. Let me see here. Oh, this was from the opening. This was from our very first night, and I will show you in just a second what that drawing is there. But this was from the very first night I think we got there, or the second night that we got there. We all had to get nice and formal, and they had this amazing opening ceremony that I think Michelle touched upon a little bit. And this was after we had visited the Museum of Fine Arts in Beijing. And they had actually treated us all with our very own portraits that they drew. So every single person got their own drawing, which I happily still have mine here, which I guess people can't see right now. But thinking about the future and thinking about going ahead with our China-US youth friendship, this was the farewell ceremony, and this was the last day that we were actually in China. And the long banner that you see, the horizontal banner that you see there, was characters that say friendship will last forever. And I think what I would just kind of want to say to summarize all of this, and to summarize exactly what I took away from the experience, was that this was a culture and this was a country that truly wants to see real economic development for everyone. They want to see a real mutual cooperation around the world, and they have no intention with being enemies with the United States, or they have no intention of competing. When they say win-win, they really mean it. And I think one of the key takeaways of where I actually learned that was when that same translator that Robert was talking about quoted one of our presidents, and you'll never guess who this was, but this president, and I'll say what they said first, and then I'll tell you who said it. So this was the Chinese translator who was telling us about our president, where this president said, if there's a kid in Oakland who can't read, who's illiterate, and who's 12 years old, that infringes on my civil rights. And if there's somebody in Detroit, Michigan who can't drink clean water, that infringes on my civil rights. And that was Obama who said that. And this was the translator who was telling me that. And what I took away from that was that this is a country that is shifting through and really looking for the best in other cultures in the way that we are looking for the best in their culture and other cultures too. It was a very real cultural exchange and also an intellectual exchange. But I think even greater than that, what we showed and what we will continue to show going forward as the Schiller Institute is that despite the inconsistencies in our country as a whole, the Schiller Institute is always going to fight for a brighter future, not just for the United States, not just for China, but for the entire world and for humanity to come together, work together as one, and really build a shared vision and future. One of the main points that we were stressing, especially Kynan and I in our final presentations over there, was that mankind's destiny is not for the earth. It's not for us to just stay here in our cradle. We are going to move and expand out into the stars, into Mars. We're going to colonize the moon and Mars, and there will be no borders there. It's not going to be defined by one country. It's just going to be all humanity. And to see that our friends over in the East are very much on that wavelength. They're just waiting for the West to catch up, and that's okay. And I think that that's where we come in next too. So I guess just moving forward, going forward, I was very happy to see that there is a part of the world that loves and cares for their people just as much as our organization does. And I'm very excited for the future of our country, because I know that everyone on that delegation is going to be a great leader for our country and is going to move it in the right direction. And our generation is going to usher in a new era of relations. And I think also the youth that we got to exchange with are going to be amazing leaders also. So I would say anybody watching this, check back in 20 years, see where we all are. So I really didn't know what to say. So everyone else did such a great job. So that back to you, Anastasia.
Great, thank you. No, we're definitely getting a lot of questions coming in. I like people to turn their cameras back on because we're going to go into a roundtable discussion. But we're definitely getting a lot of very interesting questions of people wanting to know, like, what was the response to the United States? How did they take us in? What did they take from Americans? What was their impression? This kind of thing. So I'd actually would just like to start off with that kind of this question's come in a couple of times now. So that people are asking, what did the Chinese take from you guys, and how did they receive us in terms of the ideas that we presented? So why don't you guys, whoever's got an idea, why don't you just jump in? Can we pull everybody up here?
Oh, everybody is up on the
Oh, okay, sorry, I can't see it on the Zoom here. But whoever's got an idea, go ahead.
Just gallery view, you'll be okay.
Well,
hi, can I be heard?
Let's do, was that Michelle?
go ahead.
Let's go Michelle, and then let's go to you next.
real quick, for what it's worth, one of our friends said, before working with your group, I would have described American youth as arrogant and ignorant. But you guys are completely different. You have a positive energy, and that this kind of exchange is crucial in this defining moment for mankind. That's what my little notes here say.
What were you going to say, Frank? Or sorry, not Frank. Robert?
Yeah, there was just one small detail, but I think it was characteristic. Was one of the members of the All China Youth Federation. We were at a meal, and I don't remember exactly where we were at in the conversation, but I ended up bringing up the position that the Schiller Institute and the LaRouche organization have about the need to reinstate Glass-Steagall, and he kind of perked up, and then a few minutes later he said, "What was that legislation you were talking about?" And then he had me write it down for him, and he was clearly very interested. And as far as I understand, there has been similar legislation passed in China, but it was just that very clear desire to have specific information about legislation and things like that I saw in that moment. was characteristic of the trip as a whole. That's all.
Thank you.
Oh, I do have one thing to add to that. Let me pull it up here. I sent a message over to one of our friends who we have a really close bond with, and his response was, "I'm so glad and proud to hear you saying so. Our countries definitely need us. You'll always be welcomed by China and myself. I didn't expect such a deep and profound friendship, but I'm glad I got to know you and the rest of your delegation. I hope that this opens up a new era for both of our countries."
Wow, that's a really profound response. Thank you for sharing that. No, I as somebody was saying earlier, it's the youth. It's actually this dialogue amongst the youth that is going to change the relationship forward in overcoming these ideological problems. I actually want to highlight another question that's come in from Frank, and I'll just select the question here. He says, "What do you think surprised or was the most interesting to you that you learned on the trip? Was there anything that surprised you?"
The answer is yes, but there's a lot to pick from, so I'll let someone else go first.
Well, I'll just, the biggest shock for me was that they seem to be much further along in becoming a prosperous society than I thought was the case. And there was a bunch of stuff that was like being in the Jetsons. Things that just, the big things, but also little things that they've developed to make life more comfortable, automate various things. The mahjong tables are automated. They reset up their tiles automatically so people don't have to take their time doing that. They can concentrate on the more valuable parts of life. So I think we've hit on a number of these conveniences, including at the Transportation Authority, which there is one for every major city. It's publicly accessible. You can look ahead if there are parking spaces where you're trying to go. Oh my gosh. For those of us who've tried to park in New York City. So anyway, a lot of little things. So that was, yeah.
I think the biggest shock for me was the toilets. They got holes in the ground, which was uncomfortable. But anyways, I was really impressed. I think someone mentioned it already, by the rural revitalization programs. We went to one village called Siduha. I hope I'm pronouncing it right, but they're famed for their chestnut production. And I know Michelle was talking about the Airbnbs that they've developed. It was just wonderful to see how developed this village was. And we actually got to interact with some of the villagers who were really happy to see us. They're really happy doing what they're doing. And it was just a wonderful experience. Even, it's not just the cities which you're experiencing development, but in these rural communities, they're incredibly advanced. So I was really impressed with that.
I was impressed at the fact that, for one, I didn't really know what to expect because, to be honest, I'm a little biased by, the Western media and what they say about China and stuff, right? But you also hear about the Belt and Road, right? So it was actually a good opportunity to go see, like, okay, well, let's see what we're really getting into. And everything was pretty much just like whoa, this is not what I thought it was at all. It was just breaking through like all of the media lies. The biggest one was the fact that they have just an openness. They have no problem talking about geopolitical issues. They're not hidden from it at all. They're very well aware of what's going on. This was just ordinary people and ordinary citizens. And I think the biggest shock for me was when we went into a bookstore slash bar slash nightclub slash social gathering slash movie theater place all in one. It was like a real, youth social place. And the store owner said, yeah, man, I just hope, US and China can fix things because one can't, exist without the other. This was just a regular store owner. This wasn't like somebody, some government official. This wasn't somebody who even cared too much about politics. He said, yeah, one can't exist without the other. And, he said he had faith that there were going to be better relations between the two countries. He said, that's just naturally what's going to happen. He said, there's no way we can stay enemies because there's no reason to be. And I just was like, wow, the people in China don't have any ill will towards Americans. And they know that American people are very friendly. Yeah. Right. And they wouldn't even want to, like, how do I put this? They wouldn't even say, like, they wouldn't say anything bad about Joe Biden. I'll put it that way. All right. Like they didn't want to disrespect us because they thought that by saying something about Joe Biden, it would be as if they were like stepping on our culture or something. And it was just like, I really appreciated that, that they didn't want to belittle us. They really wanted to treat us with respect, and they wanted to treat, our country in a respectful way, in a dignified way.
Yeah, well, some of you were bringing up during the presentation portion, that you were able to bring up different parts of the United States, good parts of our history, good presidents, good things like that. And I was talking with Lainey Rubenstein a little bit about some of the presentations that you guys were able to give. And I was wondering if, were you guys able to go through in those presentations, like some of the, maybe like the space program or the Grand Coulee Dam or some of the things that, actually, funny enough, like Friedrich List and Hamilton, some of the ideas that are building in China with the Belt and Road Initiative and some of the new economic ideas are inspired by many American concepts or many American ideas with obviously their own creative output. So I'm curious if you guys were able to express some of these things.
I think you should take this one up.
Sure, I could talk about what Jose and I talked up. He already mentioned it, but I actually made a particular emphasis on the German rocket scientist Kraft Erika, whom Helga LaRouche was good friends with and collaborated with from the late 70s to the early 80s, I think, till his death in 1984. I actually talked about his philosophical concept of the extraterrestrial imperative, that it's incumbent upon mankind to actually go out and navigate the stars, to settle on other planets, and to master interstellar travel and even go beyond, discovering other galaxies. And that man at this point really is in his infancy in terms of development. So what China has been doing recently, I believe in 2019, they landed a lunar lander, Chang'e 4, on the far side of the moon. And now India, you have the incredible achievement of Chandrayaan 3 landing on the South Pole, which recently at the BRICS summit in Johannesburg, Modi had made a great deal about this. So, China and the United States can cooperate on these kinds of endeavors, transcending national boundaries, and especially geopolitics. And Kraft Erika is a model for that. And I'll also mention one more person who actually passed away recently, last week, Marcia Freeman. She was a member of the Schiller Institute. She had the opportunity to work with Kraft Erika, and she had actually written a book about him, a biography about him called Kraft Erika's Extraterrestrial Imperative. I had actually mentioned her in the presentation because I thought it was important just to talk about the kinds of people that the Schiller Institute has developed. And really, we need to, expand on Croft Erica's and Marcia Freeman's work and spread it to all of mankind. So I'll just say that.
Absolutely. Were you going to say something, Michelle?
That we didn't necessarily do it in every single one of the discussions we were at. It might not have worked every time, but there were quite a number of very strong presentations given on some of the, well, I'll just mention Lainey gave a very excellent presentation going to the most beautiful ideas of Confucius, Plato, and Schiller, and how they each have these very high ideas of human beings and the development of human beings and how they're coherent, and how the United States right now is unfortunately acting as a colony of the British Empire. We're colonized, and we intend to break out of that. Robert gave, I'm going out of chronological order in world history, Robert gave what I thought was a very strong presentation on the assassination of John F. Kennedy and the effects of the cover-up on the American people. Kennedy was a really important point of resonance, I think, with a lot of the Chinese, because that was such a high moment, and they seem familiar with it. I and Adrian and Mike brought up, and I'm sure others in various of the discussions, some of the coherence of great infrastructure development between our two nations. Look at the Tennessee Valley, look at the Three Gorges Dam. Look at our other great leaders who were developers. I'll tell you a very intelligent, surprising to me, very intelligent response when I was speaking one-on-one to one of our hosts and explaining more about the Schiller Institute, who we are, who Helga is, and then we were talking about US history, and I was explaining about the many American presidents who were developers being assassinated, and she said to me, I hope Helga has very good security. So she was able to really pull that together, and you can tell she was listening. She was really there with the discussion. But yeah, I think both in one-on-one discussions and in some of the formal presentations, we were able to put out this, I would call it positive history, positive, truthful history out there.
Well, that's excellent. No, I think just in my thinking, and not that I've been to China or anything, but it's always a surprise from other countries to hear, coming from Americans, like this pride and love of the good history that we have, because a lot of Americans don't really have that anymore, or they don't express it, or if they do, it's kind of like a fantasy. They're just kind of like, fantasizing about being patriotic or something. But to actually have a certain knowledge and love and appreciation for the anti-imperialistic history of the United States is, I think, really, really important. And it sounds like that's what you guys were able to express to many people as a delegation, which I'm really, as a member of the Schiller Institute, I'm very proud of that. So thank you for doing that.
Can I just give a special shout out to Adrian, who did a very good job at bringing up the American system.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Between Robert and Kynan and I's presentation, Adrian did a phenomenal job going over the TVA, comparing it to the Three Gorges Dam, talking about what America would look like in a Belt and Road, but also just the real history of like how the United States has developed its own infrastructure and going through a real physical economy. And I think a lot of people in the room that we gave the presentations were surprised by that we came with such depth and understanding of our own history and how it can collaborate going forward between our two countries.
Yeah, there's one fun question that's come in from a friend of ours named Jack Gilroy, who is a, pardon me, Jack, but I believe you're an octogenarian. If you're not, I apologize, then you're a septuagenarian. But he's asking, because he's really excited about the youth delegation that went out and was happy to see the responses. And he's like, well, what do you guys think about like an old person delegation, a 70 plus? Like, do you think it would have the same kind of response? Do you think people would, you guys would we would get the same kind of response in this kind of dialogue? I'm seeing some nodding heads, yes. I think the answer is yes, Jack. All right, well, moving on here. Well, we got a few other questions, and then we'll start moving on to wrap up. Let's see. So we have a question from Munasha, who, and I think this is especially the case since we're actually seeing like an openness and a friendliness of China versus the kind of nastiness and whatnot that's coming out from the United States and the West, which is unfounded. He's asking, like, what do you think the reasons are that the Western nations despise Chinese culture, especially given what you've experienced? Why do you think that is?
Well, I'll just start with something that came up in a discussion I was having. Ooh, I hear someone's unmuted. I'd love to hear from others. But that Americans are very angry about what's been done to our nation. Very, very angry. And that when you're very upset about yourself, I think it's harder to have a generous spirit looking towards others. So maybe that'll start the ball. Others can pipe in with other thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, if I could try to add to that, I would say I was trying to find this quote to prepare for this discussion, and I couldn't find it, so I'll have to paraphrase it. But this from an essay by Lyndon LaRouche, he says something to the effect of ideas of universal principle can only ever be communicated through irony. And that was sort of the thesis of the presentation that I gave about Kennedy, was the irony of the inability for Americans to appreciate the political culture that's developing around China and other countries more east of Europe. And I think that really does just come down to the sort of blatant fact of the colonial status of the United States. And so it's that undoubtedly can be expanded upon, but I think that's certainly my understanding, and I think probably it's something that maybe someone else could say something about.
I think it was at the Belt and Road Institute that somebody said that the idea, they took it back to that Kennedy post-World War II era, that liberal democracy has won, that, the liberalization has won out, and or maybe it was at the end of the Cold War, but anyway, if you believe that, then seeing the decline now and seeing that challenge now makes you want to hold on to that idea and fight for what you thought was your victory. The rise of another is, going to eat my lunch. And I think it screams out for the aesthetical education of our population, and our importance in doing that, because the American population is looking for someone to blame.
Oh, sorry, Mike. Go ahead.
That's it.
I would just say that I think that the policy of the West has been Malthusianism, whereas the Chinese have rejected it. It's just a complete rejection of Malthusianism, and I think there's a bit of resentment towards it. And you can see that in the way the Chinese talk about the Green Initiative, because it's not about how are we going to sacrifice our people for development. It's how can man coexist with nature and keep developing forward. So as opposed to the Malthusian idea that nature supersedes man.
I'll just say one thing, that this was my first time traveling internationally to another country, and I understood that the importance of actually going to other nations, experiencing their cultures and interacting with the people on the streets, learning their history, getting to know the language. And I think that's something that not a lot of Americans are doing today. So instead of actually listening to what the media tells you, reading a newspaper or an article and thinking that you know everything, actually go to these countries and learn something about them. So I think that's the best way for people to remedy their axioms, their wrong axioms about other peoples.
No, I think that's a very good response. It's actually provoking me to ask a question, because after you go abroad, especially if it's your first time and you start experiencing other cultures and you're kind of immersed in it, and then you come back to the United States, your view of the United States, not it being good or bad, but kind of your view of the world in general starts to change. And I actually wanted to hear from you guys. Maybe this will be our wrap-up question. How do you, for the audience who's on, which we've got, at least over 100 people who are watching live right now, who are interacting and talking and asking questions, how do you recommend for our audience members to take what you've experienced and to be able to go out and also be really world representatives, not just representatives of the United States, but world representatives, in order to be kind of like this, vessel for peace? How do you guys see people can take action in order to do that? So I just want to get your guys' thoughts on that.
Do you want to go in an order, or is this a free-for-all?
Just whoever wants to go first, go ahead. I know it's kind of a lofty question, because it's, you've got to have some thought about it. But you guys did just come back and you are experiencing this firsthand. So I would imagine that you'd have a view of yourself, a different identity. Your identity's probably changed. And how would you express that in order to help others to also go through that?
I mean, just one thing to take into account is to make sure that you're not getting dragged down by bad media. I actually have just decided in the past couple days to stop using one of my social media platforms that tends to depress me. And if you're not already, to make sure you're reading the Daily Alert, which we put out and has a pretty good daily news perspective on the world. The EIR is the weekly journal. You can also subscribe to, I think China Daily is a good news source. I follow it. And it was interesting, while we were there was this meeting between, I think, Blinken and Wang Yi. And I don't remember the exact wording, but the Western media had something, the headlines had a pretty, like, they met or something like that. And then China Daily was like, the meeting bodes well for peaceful cooperation. So it just had a different vibe. So on the news front, to not get dragged down on shallow, incorrect perspectives as you keep on top of the world developments, and you do want to keep on top probably of China and other nations. Oh gosh, what was it? Bangladesh something, or getting like their first nuclear plant right now. And so to keep on top of these things because it's real and it's part of the world. But Helga has always said that you want to relate to other cultures from what's most beautiful about them. And I think that's a good, like, keystone in your approach. Frankly, maybe that should be the way we approach other people. I can't say that's so easy. And certainly it's easier with people that are farther away than maybe the people you deal with on a daily basis. But if you have zero understanding about XYZ culture, find something beautiful in it. One way, certainly the art is a traditional art, not necessarily modern art, but the most beautiful art in a culture can be a point of accessibility to understanding. Yeah.
Be Job. Times are good. Be generous. Be on your best. Times are bad. Be on your best anyway. What is good? What is best? Look to the most beautiful ideas. I had the pleasure of talking to somebody who really loved Hamlet, and on my way to educate her on what we thought about Hamlet, I found out that she already knew. She had used it in her own life, to be or not to be, to live or to die a coward's death. That was the choice in her mind, to make a decision to go against what her family wanted and take a less prestigious job that better fit her passion and her mission. Was the kind of people we got to talk to over there. But yeah.
I would say one of the things that I definitely took away was the idea of patience as a virtue. I think all of us as organizers definitely could practice a little more patience, especially since we want to build a country. We want to bring it back to its ideals. We want to take back our government from the oligarchical forces that have hijacked it. And that's going to require some patience, but sternness also. I think that's something that has transformed in myself too. There's a lot more to say, but I think I'll leave it at that.
I'll just say that, as Helga always says, think of yourself as a world citizen and not just the patriot of your own nation. I think that's one of the biggest things I learned on that trip. And Helga says it all the time, but actually going to a different country, like I said, it vastly changes your perspective on things. So people should think of themselves in that role. They should think about how other nations look at the United States and how they want to be perceived. And they should take an active role in intervening in the world situation from that standpoint. So.
Do you have any closing remarks, Robert?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Sorry, this phone is giving me some grief today. But yeah, I think the main takeaway that I had came at a certain moment in the trip when I was speaking, and I felt a kind of uncanny thing that I hadn't felt before, which was, I think, basically just a kind of recognition of what Kynan was just saying. And I think the recognition was that it's not just that you choose to be a world citizen over and above choosing to be a patriot, but that actually when you are experiencing true patriotism, you are experiencing a kind of wholeness that of necessity transcends any kind of smaller division like a nation state. And so I think that's only just to reinforce what Kynan was saying, but to say that I think that's very available to us. And I think that the trip certainly gave me the impression that it's really there for the taking. It's just a matter of communicating these ideas in the right way for people to have that perception that they are linked into a wholeness that is very freeing and empowering.
Thank you. Now, I think this is going to be very helpful for the people in the chat, because there was some fighting over communism and anti-communism and it was all sorts of stuff going on. But I think what it really comes down to is clear your mind of all of these things, all of this noise that's going on in your head about why you like or don't like something, and think about what the principles are. And I think what you guys just expressed in coming back from this trip, and I mean, I can only imagine how your organizing is going to be now that you're going to take this experience and share it with others and organize people from that place, from that placement that you're discussing. And I really look forward to more of these kinds of dialogues, these cultural dialogues, and definitely having more of you guys on to talk and kind of flesh out more of what you guys did in the future. So with that, I really want to make sure that everybody on the show today, one, if you love this discussion, become a member of the LaRouche organization and the Schiller Institute. Support us. I'll include a link in the chat for people to donate. Definitely donate to our organization. We're completely independent and we're only financed by people like yourself. Become active. Get active with our movement. We are very serious about stopping thermonuclear war. We obviously look above ideological differences, and we want to bring people together around the common aims of mankind. And what Mr. Lyndon LaRouche and Helga LaRouche, all of the work that we've done for 50 years is now coming to the forefront of world history. And we want to work with you in order to create this new security and development architecture. So organize with us. If you would like to get active, please sign up. You can leave your name, phone, and email at the LaRouche organization website, which we'll also provide for you. And please share this around. Get this out to other people. If you enjoyed it, get it to your friends and family, and let us know what you and other people thought. We want to hear feedback on what everybody's thinking. Good, bad, ugly, whatever. It's all good intelligence. And I really appreciate everybody joining us today. And please make sure to share around the peace proposal. And we'll see you next week at 2 o'clock for another exciting discussion with the LaRouche organization. Thank you.
Wait, are we ending with our little music thingy?
Oh, sure.
Our not so little music thingy.
Yes, that's right. We wanted to show the music. That's what we wanted to close out with. Please pull that up.
Okay, here we go. All right.
rally round the flag, boys will rally once again, shouting the battle cry of freedom. We will rally from the hillside, we'll gather from the plains, shouting the battle cry of freedom. The Union forever, hurrah, boys, hurrah! Down with the traitor, up with the star. While we rally round the flag, boys, rally once again, shouting the battle cry of freedom. So we're springing to the call from the east and from the west, shouting the battle cry